Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentor and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the video, guys, I'm going to be talking about that sinking feeling you sometimes get just after departure. And also, why? Why do the engines sound like they're suddenly reducing in power as you're climbing out? This video is for all of you who are a little bit of nervous flyers, but it's also some quite good information for anyone who's interested in aviation, so stay tuned.
31016, everyone right, right on in. Clear to land, 31 right. Delta 260.
This video is brought to you in cooperation with our long-term sponsor, Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of high-quality video courses in pretty much anything that you can imagine. The 501st of you who uses this link here below will get 2 months of premium Skillshare membership completely for free, so you can check them all out just by yourself. Right guys, so like I've mentioned in the beginning, this video is made after I have received hundreds of questions from all of you out there who are a little bit nervous flyers. And it all goes like this. How come just after departure, just when I'm starting to relax, it feels like the engines are spooling back and it feels like my stomach is going up and I'm starting to fall down towards Earth again? What's that all about? Why are you subjecting us to this? Well, as I'm sure that you can imagine, guys, there is a good reason for all of this happening. Now, when it comes to the engine noise, if we start with that, you have to understand a little bit how a jet engine works. So a jet engine essentially works by accelerating air through the core of the engine, heating it using a lot of fuel that ignites, accelerating it out, and then pushing the aircraft forward with the reaction force that it creates. Now, the internal part of the engine are able to produce so much thrust that it could actually damage the engine components. Now, obviously, the engine manufacturers have made sure that the engine doesn't overboost themselves. And they've done so using engine control units, like on the 737 called the EEC, which is the electronic engine control, or a FADEC system. And what that actually does is it just reduces the amount of fuel that's being injected into the engine, because there are two limiting factors to a jet engine at any point, and that is the amount of pressure that the internal components can take, and then the amount of temperature that they can take. Initially, or on a normal day, the first thing that's going to be limiting is the engine pressure. So, and that's why the engines are what we call flat rated. It means that the EEC is controlling the amount of fuel that's being injected into the engines to make sure that we have a healthy safety margin and the engines keep working. As the temperature outside starts rising, well, then the engines will start to be limited by the core temperature instead. And when the core temperature is limiting, what happens is that the engines are not able to produce as much thrust anymore. So as the temperature starts rising, well, then the amount of thrust will start decreasing. And I talked about this in last week's video about why it's a problem sometimes to fly during the summer. But why is this all important? Well, it is important because you need to understand what we, the pilots, are trying to achieve. We always try to extend engine life to reduce the wear of the engines and also the amount of fuel being used for both noise and economic reasons. So when we are setting up for departure, when we're sitting at the gate, we use our performance tools and we calculate how little thrust can we use on the engines and still take off with all of the safety margins that we need. That normally means that we're not taking off with full thrust, we're taking off with a limited amount of thrust. When it comes to how much thrust we're using, we calculate that in percentage points of N1, which is the movement of the fan. And that goes up to just above 100%. Don't ask me why it's a little bit above 100%. But generally it's about, full takeoff thrust might be around 98, 99%. and reduced takeoff thrust might be as low as 91%. All right? This has to do with how long the runway is, the temperature outside, the pressure outside, if there's any obstacles around the airport, and things like that. But in some cases, we need full takeoff thrust. So if, for example, it's really hot outside, or there is obstacles around the runway which you need to clear well, in that case, we can use all the way up to maximum takeoff thrust. But the engines are not allowed to go on full takeoff thrust for more than, in the 737 case, around 5 minutes. That can be extended to 10 minutes, but 5 minutes is a good thing to keep in mind, right? In the case of a normal takeoff, we never run it on takeoff thrust for that long. The 5-minute rule is really only there in case we would have an engine failure after departure and we need to climb out only with one engine. Well, then the remaining engine needs to be able to keep takeoff thrust up to around 5 minutes, especially if we're heavy. But on a normal departure, and by the way, if you want to see how we deal with an engine failure after takeoff, how we do the checklist and how we work together, then I have a collection inside of the Mentour Aviation app called Engine Failure After Takeoff. So just go to the app and check out that collection. But in a normal takeoff, on a normal day-to-day takeoff, it's not going to be 5 minutes, it's going to be way less than that. But we still need to reduce thrust. And the way that we do that is that the EECs are being told by our FMC to reduce the thrust from takeoff thrust to climb thrust at around 1500 feet. That can be changed inside of the FMC, but 1500 feet is what we normally use. So this means that if we're taking off with high takeoff thrust, as in close to max takeoff thrust, as we're climbing off at about 1500 feet, the engines will go from full takeoff thrust to climb thrust, which is maybe a reduction of a few percentage points. But what you will hear, especially if you're a nervous flyer and you're listening to all of these different sounds and noises, is you'll hear the engine go from wee and go back like that. And of course, that scares the living daylight out of someone who's constantly looking for failures. But now that you watch this video, you know that this is just a normal procedure. This is something that we do on almost any takeoff. Now, the opposite is also true. If we have used a lot of reduced takeoff, if we've reduced the takeoff thrust from the engines because we have a really long runway, for example, then at 1500 feet you might hear an engine increase. So that's the reduced takeoff thrust now at 1500 feet going up to normal climb thrust. So both of these things is possible to hear, and both of them are completely normal. Okay? Good. We can also, in certain circumstances, have to level off after departure because of a very low level off altitude. That might be because of arrival routes into a different runway, things like that. And obviously, as we level off, we're also going to reduce thrust in order to facilitate the level off. But what about that sinking feeling then? What about the feeling that you suddenly start to pitch down after departure? Well, in order to understand that part, you also have to understand a little bit about how the human inner ear works. So we, humans, we were never really designed to go, flying aircraft, driving sports cars, or even driving cars. We were designed to be running around out on the savannah, maybe trying to catch a rabbit to eat or run away from a saber-toothed tiger. So this means that the inner ear were never really designed to sustain prolonged accelerations or a lot of different pitch changes. But in an aircraft, obviously, as we are taking off, we are constantly accelerating, and also we are making some quite large pitch changes. The problem with the inner ear is that if you have, for example, high pitch for a long time, then the little sensors inside of your inner ear will go from feeling that pitch to resetting themselves to normal. They feel that that high pitch that you have, this is now the new normal, right? That's the way we live now, okay? But that also means that if you go from a high pitch to a slightly lower pitch, the way that our inner ear will interpret that is as a pitch forward. This is called somatographic illusion, and actually that has caused quite a bit of accidents throughout the years when pilots go by the feeling of their inner ear rather than looking at their instruments, they can do some quite strange things. And this is also the principle that we're using when we are simulating pitch in the simulator. So in the simulator, both pitch and acceleration is simulated by the simulator moving into different pitch position, tricking our brains that it's accelerating or pitching, depending on what we see on our screens. Now, obviously, we, the pilots, we can see this on our displays, but you, who are sitting in the back, you don't have any instruments. So the only thing that you feel is that the aircraft goes from a high pitch to slightly lower pitch, and it feels like you're pitching forward. So why are we reducing the pitch then? Well, I did a video about high lift devices, flaps and slats earlier on, about 2 years ago. I highly recommend you to go and check out that episode. But essentially what you need to understand is that the aircrafts are built to fly at fairly high speeds. But when we're taking off, we only have a limited amount of runway. And we need to be able to take off on that runway with a good safety margin. We also need to be able to take off at a speed low enough so that the tires, who are spinning, doesn't spin so fast that they explode. Okay? And we do that with the help of flaps. Now the problem with flaps and slats is that they are quite big. They increase the wing surface and also the general chord of the wing. And when they do that, they create drag. Now we don't want drag. We want to be able to fly fast and economic. So this means that at some point we need to retract these high lift devices. And we do that when the takeoff phase is done. So it depends if we're doing noise abatement procedure 1 or noise abatement procedure 2, which I'll get to in a second. But what you need to understand is that when we take the flaps in order to be able to continue to fly the aircraft, we need to accelerate to a speed where the wing produces enough lift to fly without the high lift devices. The way we do that is we pitch forward. We use the same thrust, pitch the aircraft down. We go from a very high climb rate to slightly lower climb rate. We accelerate the aircraft, and as the aircraft accelerates, we start taking the flaps in and continue into our climb configuration. Like I said, that's normally when you're feeling that the aircraft is suddenly pitching forward.
Flaps 1 set.
Okay?
Flaps up, speed check.
So that's 2 of the biggest questions that I get about why aircraft do like this from nervous flyers. Make sense so far? Good. What about noise abatement procedures then? Noise abatement procedure 1 and 2, what's that? Well, these are ICAO mandated procedures that we, the pilots, have been given in order to minimize the amount of noise footprint that we cause around the airport. So an airport is built either close to noise sensitive areas or further away, and depending on where they are, we can use 2 different procedures. Noise abatement procedure number 2 means that we are climbing away, just like I described before, and between 800 to 1000 feet, we then start accelerating, retracting the flaps, which means that we now have less drag and we can initiate the climb with less drag earlier, which means that at a medium to far distance from the airport, we are going to be able to achieve a higher altitude and less noise. Now, if we have a noise sensitive area, like for example, Barcelona or Pisa, where in the case of Pisa, you have the Leaning Tower of Pisa monument just by the airport. Well, then the important thing is to achieve as much altitude as possible early in order to reduce the noise. And then we'd use noise abatement procedure number 1. And in that case, we climb away 1500 feet, we reduce the thrust like I mentioned before, and at 3000 feet, we start accelerating and bringing the flaps in, because the flaps would have been helping us to achieve a higher altitude at a close range from the airport, but at longer range, the aircraft is now going to be slightly lower down, right? So those are the 2 different noise abatement procedures that we generally use, and when it comes to the airlines, they prefer us to use NADP 2 because it means that we're reducing and taking in the flaps earlier, which means less wear and tear, and it means definitely less fuel burn. Okay? Well, the third thing that I want to throw in, just as kind of a snack for you guys, is air pockets. I was sent a video snippet from one of you, the viewers, saying that she was on a flight flying into Heathrow, I think, and during the late turn in towards the approach, the aircraft suddenly dropped the wing and the whole aircraft shuddered around. Is that an air pocket? Well, if you've been watching my video about turbulence, you know that there's no such thing as air pockets. There's not areas in the air where there's no air and the aircraft falls down. What you have is a lot of different types of vortexes for different reasons. Now, if you are in a holding pattern above an airport, or you are in the approach procedure, you are in an area where a lot of aircraft fly close to each other and fairly close in time. Now, there is something called wake turbulence, which is produced when the wings are producing lift. The air escapes from the bottom of the wing, where there's a high pressure, to the top of the wing, where there's a low pressure. And when it does that, it creates vortexes behind. And the more lift we take out from the wings, the bigger those vortexes are. So if you are in a holding pattern, then they stack the aircraft up in 1,000 feet above each other. And these vortexes, they don't just continue behind the aircraft, they fall. And they fall with about 400 feet per minute. So this means that if you are 2.5 minutes behind someone who's 1,000 feet above you, those vortexes can hit you. And in the case of an approach, you might come in to the wake turbulence from the preceding aircraft. This is why we have separation in between the aircraft. But in some cases, due to some wind conditions, you might still hit that wake turbulence. And that's what happened on this video. The wake turbulence hit, the aircraft shudders, and then it continues to fly. You can find this happening sometimes when you're en route as well. Because if we are en route and an aircraft crosses our flight path 2 minutes ahead of us, then this might also happen. So you're flying in a completely kind of calm environment, and then suddenly you get a shudder from nowhere that comes from absolutely nowhere, and then it continues to be absolutely smooth. That is likely you flying through used air, as in the reminiscence, what's left of some wake turbulence from another aircraft that was there before or has passed above you. Air traffic control tells us normally when there is a risk of this happening, so that we can either turn or even climb or descend in order to avoid potential wake turbulence. But it's very rare and happens very, very rarely. Okay? Guys, I want to send a huge thank you to the sponsor of this episode, which is Skillshare. Once again, the 501st of you who uses this link here below will get 2 months of premium Skillshare absolutely for free. And a course that I think that you will enjoy is aerospace engineering. It's an introduction course to, you know, the people who actually build the aircraft and who maintains the aircraft that we fly. But if you're interested in anything else, it might be starting your own YouTube channel or improving on your photography skills, well then go down, use these links down here, completely free to check it out, and I promise you that you will find a course that you will like. So that's it, guys. Get into the Mentour Aviation app now. Ask your questions in there. You can always, of course, subscribe to the channel, you know, hit the notification bell if you want to know when I'm sending out live streams or when I'm doing videos like this. I'm hoping that you've done that. But if you have questions that you want me to answer directly, then go in and tag me in the Mentour Aviation chat or in one of the forums that I've done. And if you want to really interact, then get the premium subscription. You just go to settings, get the premium subscription, try it for a month, because you'll be able to, for example, interact when I do app live streams, which I do a couple of times a week. Everyone who has the app will be able to watch the live streams, but only you who have the premium subscription will be able to ask questions. You will also be able to stream videos, so from time to time I do stuff that I don't want to put out on the YouTube channel. It might be vlogs from when I'm working, or it might be something that's a little bit more sensitive, like Angry Mentor. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that out in the app, and you who have the premium subscription will be able to stream that directly to your device without downloading it. So get in, get the app. It's completely free to download, and I'll see you inside of the app. Have a fantastic day wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.